going to get right on into it. So couple things, right? So whenever I sit with my client or Zoom with my clients to help them understand the contracts, which you should all be doing, the very first thing I do is I point out the logo up here in the top left, California Association of Realtors. And I point that out because I want my clients to know that these are, you know, standardized forms for all real estate agents all across the state. These are not proprietary Keller Williams forms or, you know, us as agents. This is a standard, you know, documents that are prepared by an organization's attorneys for us. Okay. So I always start off with that. And by the way, you know, when I talk about, you know, going over the documents with your clients, you shouldn't just be docu-signing your offers out to your clients without having a discussion. You should be sending them a copy of it, maybe a draft, and then walk them through over Zoom or in person and explain, here's what this is, here's what that is, here's what we're going to do here, you know, here's why we wrote this, etc. Right? You need to go through and really explain what it is they're signing, you know? So that's part of your job, is to go through and have a discussion. So you should send them a draft PDF. And then once you're in agreement and everything looks dialed in, they have answer all their questions, then you can DocuSign it over and get the agreements dialed in, okay? So let's take a look here what we got. So we're gonna start off with the first form, disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. You know, when you look at forms, there are all kinds of different form types. This one is a disclosure, right? In addition to disclosures, we have agreements, we have advisories, right? There's inspection elections, there's removal forms, there's amendments, there's addendums. So when you're looking at a form and you're trying to figure out what it is, read the title first and foremost, right? This is a disclosure, okay? So disclosure means we're telling somebody something, right? So this form is broken down into three parts: a seller's agent, a buyer's agent, and an agent representing both the seller and the buyer. So you're gonna use this form for sellers, buyers, or dual representation, okay? And it's pretty basic and pretty simple. We're writing an offer in this scenario, so I'm just gonna go through this part of it, the buyer's agent part of it, right? So we're gonna act as a buyer's agent only. Now, if we're writing an offer on one of our own listings, then we would be looking down here. And when I say one of our own listings, I mean the brokerage. A dual agent, if you're representing a buyer, but you're writing an offer on another agent in your offices, and it's their listing, that would still be representing both buyer and the seller, okay? We'll pretend we're just writing an offer on a you know, outside agent's listing. So we're acting as the buyer, and then our duties to the buyer are right here. We have a fiduciary duty of the utmost care, integrity, honesty, and loyalty in dealing with a buyer. That's our fiduciary duty. Fiduciary means trusted advisor. It's the highest level of relationship that we as a salesperson can have with our clients, okay? And notice right below that we have duties to the seller as well, even if we're representing the buyer. So we do have duties to the seller, not a fiduciary duty. It's slightly different. Diligent skill and care, honest and fair dealings, good faith, disclosure, a duty to disclose, right? Now, we don't have a duty to disclose any sort of information that might reveal to another party information that could affect a negotiation, right? So we're not necessarily disclosing everything, but we do have a duty to disclose material facts, defects, things of that nature, okay? So that is what the disclosure regarding agency relationships are, and it's pretty simple just to read the first sentence here, that we have a fiduciary duty of the utmost care, integrity, honesty, and loyalty. Very few people are gonna have a problem with that, right? That's what they want. That's why they're hiring us. So that's page one. Everybody's gonna sign at the bottom. You're gonna have you know, your client sign, you will sign, okay, under the brokerage information. You'll have your license numbers in there, and then we're moving on. The second page of this is for you for a little light reading on a Sunday afternoon, right? If you have trouble sleeping at night, you can just go start right here at the top, and you'll be asleep probably right around here, okay? Just kidding. Yes, read through this. This is the actual civil code. This is the California Civil Code relating to agency relationships, basically just copied and pasted onto the second page here, okay? So I'm gonna not go in depth into this. You do need to take some time and read this, though. I recommend just read like a page every day. You know, and in a week or two, you'll have read, you know, the purchase agreement and the listing agreement. But you should be reading it and remembering and trying to, you know, incorporate some of this stuff. There's a section here. It says, "Do not complete, sample only." I want you to just kind of take a little mental photograph of this section right here, because it's going to come up again on the first page of the contract. It's talking about confirming relationships. This is a disclosure about relationships. This is not us confirming that we are the agent of the buyer at this point, okay? The confirmation happens in a paragraph that looks similar to this. Okay, let's move on to the second page that comes with our purchase agreement. So this next one is called a possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. Look, disclosure and consent. So this is a disclosure and they're agreeing to something here. Well, what is it? So it basically says here that we may, the broker, by the way, not just you as an agent, but the actual company that you're working with. So whichever office you are in, that company may have other buyers that are looking for homes just like yours, okay? And why is that important? Well, probably because one day, two buyers from the same company were looking at the same house. One got it, one didn't. And guess what happened? Somebody sued somebody, right? For not getting the house. So we now have to make a disclosure and gain consent that the buyer is okay, understanding that we may have other buyers that are looking for exactly the same type of property. And I would say probably right now, guys and gals, there's such limited inventory. It's highly likely that a buyer that you're working with and another buyer in the same office may be looking for the exact same type of house, same price range, same everything, okay? So that's all it says. It's just saying we may, possible, right? We're not telling them that we do, we just say we might have more than one buyer looking for the same type of house. And by the way, these first two documents, you're gonna sign these in the listing agreement and the purchase agreement because we may have more than one seller looking to sell similar homes. Or we may have both. We may have both, dual agency, okay? The last part of this paragraph or this form here says, offers are not necessarily confidential. So buyer, we're telling you right now, the seller or listing agent may tell other buyers the terms of your offer if you don't have a confidentiality agreement. And frankly, those just are not very common, okay? So if you want to prevent that, you could ask for this confidentiality, but it is an agreement, meaning the seller would have to agree to not disclose information about their offer, okay? And if you have a listing, you probably know that it's in your best interest and your advantage to let other buyers know how good of an offer you have because they're willing to compete right now, right? So in fact, they're willing to compete at a very high level. All right, so all parties signed here again at the bottom. We can move on. Now we've got our wire fraud, electronic funds and transfer advisory. On your buyer deals, ladies and gentlemen, this is super, super important because wire fraud is rampant, especially with stay-at-home orders. People are spending a lot of time behind computer screens. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are spending time behind computer screens that know how to take advantage of others and take that money from their pocket and put it into their own, okay? So wire fraud. Well, how does this happen? I'll give you kind of an idea about what happens here. Hackers will send out phishing emails and they'll get people like you guys, agents, to reset, quote unquote, your email password. And what they're basically doing is capturing your login credentials. Or they'll go straight into your bank account and try to get those login credentials. And I'm sure you guys have all gotten spam emails that looks like it comes from Bank of America or Wells Fargo, but then you read like the who it came from, and it's like, just a bunch of random characters and a fake email address, obviously. So hackers are doing this to your clients, they're doing this to you as agents, they're doing this to escrow companies. And what they'll do is if they can get access to an escrow company, they'll send your client fake wire instructions. And then your client goes and wires all their money to close escrow to the wrong account, an offshore bank account or wherever it is. And guess what? As soon as that wire's out, it's gone. It's gone, okay? So with that said, we have a wire transfer advisory form here. And it gives you some steps, right? Get phone numbers and account numbers only from the appropriate parties, escrow officers, property managers, et cetera, the landlords, okay? It says, do not ever wire funds. Let me see, I gotta move some windows around prior to calling to confirm. I tell all my clients, do not send any money without picking up the phone and calling the person to verify the wire instructions, the routing number, and the bank account, right? Again, orally confirm. Don't send personal information, emails, or texts. Make sure that you have all your passwords dialed in, okay? By the way, guys, make sure you guys are updating your passwords from time to time. I'll show you a little trick here if I can. Let me reshare a window. Okay. So if you're using like a Gmail-based service, if you look at the bottom of your email, like scroll to the very bottom here, and it shows you at the bottom, last account activity, and it shows where you logged in, open when in one other location. And if you click the details, it'll tell you all the places that you're logged into your email. And if you see stuff maybe in a foreign country or a different state, you probably should take a look and reset your passwords, right? So this form, or this link tells you all those details about where you've logged in, when you've last used your browsers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so little pro tip, you guys need to be doing this too, okay? All right, back to our documents. So that's the wire transfer advisory form. Your clients sign it. And remember, guys, this is why it's important for you to explain this stuff to your clients, not just, have them sign it, explain it. They need to understand and know this stuff, right? All right, let's dive into the purchase agreement. So here we are on page number 1. So what do we got here? Again, if you have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, raise your hand, or just unmute yourself. So California Residential Purchase Agreement, right? We've just seen an advisory, we've seen 2 disclosures, we've seen a consent form. This is an agreement, and it also serves as escrow instructions between the buyer and the seller. We have our revision dates up here. All the forms will be stamped. By the way, I know you guys are awesome for being here. You're trying to be experts in the contract. There's going to be a brand new purchase agreement, like basically rewritten from the ground up, coming out. It was supposed to come out this December. Due to COVID, they pushed it back to next year, okay? So we got another 1.5 years or a year and a third to use this contract. So what do we got? Well, top left, date prepared. That is simply the day you're writing the offer, okay? So if I'm over here in September, today's the 21st, right? Is that right? 28th, 21st? We'll go with 21st, okay? So this is the date that I'm drafting the actual contract. It's not necessarily the date I'm submitting it or the date of acceptance or anything. It's just the day you're drafting it. And if you update it, then you can update it to the new date. Offer from buyer, right? And usually you will have filled all this stuff out on your cover sheet because you're using templates and cover sheets. If you don't know what that means, shoot me a text and I'll send you a link to the template video. Real property to be acquired is, here's our address, right? County, city, zip, our parcel number. Where do we get the parcel number? It's on the MLS. If you use the MLS Connect feature, that should be auto-populated, okay? C is the price, and all you gotta do is type in the numbers. I got a cool $1 million right here, all dialed in. D, close of escrow. How long is the escrow gonna be? Well, and how do you figure that out even, right? Well, there's a few ways. One is you ask the lender, how long do you need to close escrow? 2, you'll ask your buyer, do you have any specific needs about how long you need to close escrow? And then 3, you ask the listing agent, does the seller have any requirements about closing escrow? And then you take all the answers to that and you figure out what's the most equitable for all parties, okay? All right. Paragraph 2, agency. Remember that first form we looked at, the agency disclosure? Well, here we are again. This is where that form is incorporated into the agreement, okay? Any form, any additional forms that you're adding to your offer You need to incorporate them. And you notice here, this box is pre-checked because the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships is automatically attached and incorporated into the agreement. If you have other addendums or amendments, like you're using the coronavirus addendum, well, you need to reference that from within the document for it to be a part of this contract, okay? So D, confirmation. Remember I told you to take that mental snapshot of this confirmation section? Here is where agency relationships are confirmed for this transaction, okay? In this case, we got Keller Williams Pacific Estates representing the seller, and the seller's agent is Scott here. The buyer's brokerage is Pacific Estates Cerritos. We got Wendy over here. Update that guy, yep. And then they're representing the buyer. If you're double ending a deal or you're working with somebody within your office, you would check this box, both the buyer and seller as dual agents, okay? You'll fill in all the license numbers over here. A lot of that should be auto-populated. And then, you know, that second form we talked about, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. Look right here, potentially competing buyers and sellers. The parties acknowledge receipt of, right, that document, the possible representation. So again, we've incorporated it into the contract. All right. Paragraph 3, we're going to get into finance terms. This is a lot of good stuff here. Okay. The very first thing next to finance term, buyer represents that funds will be good when deposited with the escrow holder. What does that mean? It means that coming up with the cash to buy the house is not a contingency of the agreement. They're saying they have the money. So if you get in the middle of escrow and the buyer says, oh, you know, the gift letter fell through, I can't get the money, that's no reason to cancel. That's not a reason to cancel. You wrote an offer, you represented that you had access to these funds, and you cannot cancel because of that, okay? So funds are represented to be good and available when we write this offer up. A is the initial deposit. So the deposit is going to be in this amount, right? Whatever amount you write in there, typically between 1% and 3%. Why no more than 3%? Well, liquidated damages is limited to 3%. Okay, so you're typically not going to go any higher than that. Buyer's direct deposit. Buyer will deliver the deposit directly to escrow by electronic funds. Okay, so the default here is a wire transfer. You do not need to make any sort of changes in regards to this if you're planning to do a wire transfer, and most people are probably going to do a wire transfer, okay? I do see a lot of people where they'll check other and then they type in wire, okay? You're just restating what's already been, you know, noted here. You do not need to do that. If your client wants to put a check for whatever reason, you know, I had a client, he's a little bit old school, we wrote an offer. He wanted to bring a check into escrow. So I checked in, personal check, and he just dropped the money off. Okay, all good. Ask, right? Ask and find out. Okay, there is a section here that the deposit was giving to the agent. Let me be real clear about this. Don't touch people's money, right? You guys never should be collecting checks from your clients. The moment you put your fingers on that check, it needs to be put into a trust account or logged into a trust log. We don't want those to be used, mainly because trust violations are the #1 Department of Real Estate violation. Escrow is there. Have your client send the money to escrow. They can drive it to escrow. Well, what if I just pick it up and drive it down? Nope, don't do it. Don't do it. We have to account for all those funds, so just don't, okay? Don't touch the money. How long does the buyer have to deliver the deposit? Well, we got 3 days. 3 days. Most every days that's counted in the purchase agreement is a calendar day, meaning it includes Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, except for the deposit. The deposit is always business days. Why? Well, because the banks are open on business days only, Monday through Friday. I suppose they're open on Saturdays these days, right? So even Sundays now. But anyways, it's going to be business days. All right, let's keep going. B is increased deposit. And I would say you're probably never going to really use this, but what it is here is the ability to increase a deposit within a certain amount of time for whatever reason, right? I did have a recent example of where this actually could be used. We were working with a buyer on a probate deal, and the court said that all the contingencies had to be removed in order to buy the property, and the buyer hadn't finished their pre-approval yet. So they said, you know what we'll do? We'll put a $500 deposit now, and then we'll increase our deposit in 10 days after we get our loan approval. Okay, so that was one recent instance of when that was a pretty valid reason to use that paragraph. For the most part, I haven't seen it used in over a decade, so you're probably not going to use that paragraph. C, all cash offer. No loan is needed to purchase the property. This offer is not contingent on buyer obtaining a loan. Written verification of funds is attached. So for cash, the default is that you are going to provide your proof of funds with the offer, okay? So it's attached, and that's it. Now, is hard money and a cash offer the same? No, not the same. So if you got a hard money deal, you're not going to check all cash. You're going to basically, if you want, remove the loan contingency. If you have, confidence that you're not going to, that you have no problem getting the financing, which would be, very aggressive, but it's different. So you don't click all cash offer when you're actually obtaining a loan. So D is the loan amount, right? So in this case, I wrote up an 80% loan, right? We have $1 million price, $1,000,000, 20% down, which means the loan is 80% or $800,000. Okay, so you do the math. I see people get this wrong all the time because they think they gotta like figure out the down payment and somehow the deposits, incorporated into that, and I'm not exactly sure, and they don't get the loan amount correct. Notice it doesn't ask for the down payment; it asks for the loan amount. So if you're putting 20% down, the loan's 80%. If you're doing FHA 3.5% down, then the loan is going to be 96.5%. So you got to make sure you do the math correctly when you are writing up your transactions. Loan is default to be conventional financing. There are checkboxes for FHA, there's checkboxes for VA, or others like seller financing. Okay, from time to time, the seller may carry back a loan. Assumed financing, probably unlikely you'll ever use that, but it's possible. And then you've got details about the financing. The loan shall be at a fixed rate not to exceed blank. So typically what I would say is put in a rate and maybe pad it by 1/4% or 3/8%. That way there's a pad to compensate for fluctuations. I don't know if you guys knew this, but rates change every single day. Every single day the interest rates adjust slightly. So, if they were quoted a rate, a week ago, they need to, put a pad on here, okay? It is important to put a rate in here though, because, if the rate gets too high, it could potentially affect your buyer's ability to qualify for the loan. So give them another reason to cancel, okay? If it happens to be adjustable, there's a section for adjustable as well. If you're getting a second loan, you'll check the box and put in the second loan information. So I've seen a lot of people get, down payment assistance programs. Talk to your lender. In most cases, those down payment assistance programs are a second loan. So you need to disclose that and put it on here into your offer, all right? And it's all the same stuff that they need to put in their interest rate and all that other stuff, okay? If it is FHA or VA, this paragraph says that the buyer has 17 days from acceptance to give the seller an FVA, okay, FHA and VA amendatory clause, of any lender required repairs or costs that the buyer is requesting the seller to pay for or correct. VA requires termite. FHA and VA appraisals may have work recommendations. So basically, if it is FHA or VA, the buyer has 17 days to inform the seller of any of these work requirements and make a request. The seller is not obligated to complete any of these things, okay? So we do have a time frame that's built in here basically though to make the request for those requirements. Any additional financing terms would go here. If maybe you're a buyer, if your buyer is asking the seller for closing costs, which probably is pretty tough in this market right now, you would write it in here. The balance of your down payment or purchase price will automatically go here, right? Notice I can't fill this in. The only place to put a down payment, I can't change it because it all does the math automatically based on your deposit and the amount of loan you're getting, the financed amount, okay? And then the total price, again, is reiterated. Everybody initials at the bottom of page 1. That's it. That's it. Let's keep going. Page 2, H, verification of down payment and closing costs. Now, you guys are all really, really great agents. You're probably going to already have your proof of funds attached to your offers. So we would check the box here, okay? But technically, the default here is that we have to give proof of funds within 3 days of opening escrow, okay? You guys know how competitive it is. Attach your proof of funds. Have a complete package, okay? I is the appraisal contingency. This is like the first real contingency that we get to, the appraisal contingency and removal. So the agreement default is, right, is contingent on a written appraisal of the property by a licensed or certified appraiser at no less than the purchase price, okay? Buyer will remove that contingency within 17 days. So that's our default appraisal contingency time frame. This is the hottest issue on offers right now, is removing the appraisal contingency, shortening the appraisal contingency time frame, or negotiating something regarding the appraisal to pay a certain amount over the highest appraised value. So, you know, that's probably the most pressure that you guys are going to get in, you know, in your offers. Okay. Let's see. Laura asks, closing costs paid, request goes in additional financing terms. Yep, right there. Okay. Let's see. Keep it moving here. Next is loan terms. So we have a section here that's asking for the loan application to be delivered within 3 days after acceptance, right? Well, again, you guys know your offers are probably not even going to get presented if you do not attach your pre-approval letter. So therefore, I have in my template, letter attached. That checkbox is default checked because I'm always giving the pre-approval letter, right? J2, loan contingency. So we just had the appraisal contingency. Now we've got our loan contingency. Buyer will act diligently in good faith to obtain the loan. Buyer's qualification is a contingency of this agreement, right? So the default is that the transaction is contingent on getting financed, okay? Very important, because I've seen agents try to use this. If there is no appraisal contingency, or the appraisal contingency has been waived or removed, failure of the property to appraise at the purchase price does not give the buyer the right to exercise the cancellation right pursuant to loan contingency. I've had people ask, well, what if we can't get the appraisal? Can't we just cancel because we can't get the loan if the appraisals comes in low? No, right? No, there's a paragraph written here specifically for that. All right. Another question, if contingency periods are being shortened, how much are they being shortened to stay competitive? I mean, I see all kinds of crazy stuff. I see listing agents asking for loan contingency to be removed in like 7 days. I mean, I don't know, call me crazy, but as a listing agent, I'm not going to ask that. It's not practical. The banks are so busy. I don't even want to set an unrealistic expectation for my own seller. It doesn't make any sense. So what do I see mostly? I don't know, appraisal, maybe the shortest I'll see it is like 10 days. So don't change any timeframes without talking to your lenders. Okay. Now I know for the most part, I can probably get an inspection done in a week, but as far as the financing goes, people are busy, man. And by the way, your lenders are always going to tell you, oh yeah, I can get it done. I can get it done. I can get it done. No problem. 7 days. I can get it done. Whatever they tell you, just consider it BS and add more time, because, you know, we have this saying, under promise and over deliver, right? So, you know, keep all those timeframes with a grain of salt. They want to come out looking like the hero, but in more cases than not, what I see happening is those timeframes are not performed on. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Loan contingency removal. How long do we have for a loan contingency? 21 days. That's the default. Okay, to give written loan contingency removal or cancel, right? Alrighty, no loan contingency. So if for whatever reason you're going to remove your loan contingencies, there's a checkbox for that. And then finishing up this paragraph, lender limits on buyer credits. What does that mean? Well, you know, when you guys negotiate for the seller to pay part of the buyer's closing costs as a credit, right? There's a limit on how much that can possibly be, because the lender can only, the seller can only credit the amount of the actual costs, which generally are limited to around 3%, right? So let's say you go through, you do a physical inspection, place is a disaster. Foundation issues, roof issues, plumbing, electric, all the stuff that you find out you didn't know about before. And you want, it's $1 million, right, for our property, and you want 60 grand in credits to fix everything. Well, if the closing costs are only $30,000, you ask for 60, and the seller agrees to give $60,000 in credits. What will happen is the lender, there's not enough credits to use, right? There's only $30,000 in actual fees and costs. So that's all that can be credited. So what happens to the additional $30,000? Well, nothing. It disappears. It disappears. There's no automatic adjustment to where do the rest of those credit funds go. So before you ask for credits from the seller, you need to ask the lender, what's the most amount we can ask for if you're really asking for a big number, okay? Because if you want more than the actual amount of the closing costs, you need to do that as a price reduction. That's the only other way to do it, is a price reduction, okay? All right, let's keep going. Paragraph 4, sale of buyer's property. Default is that it's not contingent on the buyer selling a house, but if the buyer does need to sell a house, we would check this little box here. Zip forms will then add the COP, which we'll look at in another class, contingency for purchase, okay? By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to just really take this in. Whenever you're trying to draft language on a counter, on an amendment, an addendum, seller counter, buyer counter, multiple counter, offer, I want you to just remember that I said, there's probably a form for that. There's probably a form for that. Because you know what I see? This is what I see. Contingent on buyer selling a home. And that's it, right? And yet we have this perfectly wonderful one-page document that spells out all these terms about time frames and what happens if the buyer that's buying their house cancels escrow and how long do they have to get that house in escrow. There's all kinds of stuff on there. And yet, instead of using the form, people just throw out a one sentence. And then they call me and say, well, how long does that buyer have? And I say, well, what does the form say? And you tell me you didn't use it. And then guess what? It's wide open, right? There's nothing on there. It's only a lawyer can, or a judge would decide at the end of the day how long they have, okay? So don't just be writing language in your counters and offers without, either checking with me or finding the appropriate form to be used, okay? All right, let's keep going. Partial rant over. I'm sure there's more coming though, so be ready. So as we continue on here, right, addenda and advisories, paragraph 5. This is where we can add other documents. Remember at the beginning, and I said that normally we need to incorporate documents into the purchase agreement. Here's where we're going to do that, right? If I need to use an addendum to add additional language, I'm going to check it off here. It's going to add the addendum form number 1 for me, and then I'm going to say that it's number 1. And now I've incorporated it into the contract. Notice I've got the CVA, the coronavirus addendum / amendment form attached. Notice the buyer inspection advisory, it's pre-checked, right? And it's the last 2 pages of our offer here. You'll see that in a minute, or you'll see it next time we get that far. We won't finish today, but that's automatically added to the conversation. If it's a probate, well, you're probably using the probate purchase agreement, but you'll still use the advisory. If it's a trust advisory, short sales, REOs, all that stuff will come. Septic, well, backup offer addendum. There's all kinds of different documents that we may need to use depending on the type of property and what the sale, what type of sale it is. So you'll check it off, or you'll check off other, okay? If it's an advisory, or other if it's addenda, right? Cool. Let's keep going. 6, other terms. Whatever other terms. You may have specific terms that you need to negotiate. You'll fill that in right there. And then next, 7, allocation of costs, okay? And paragraph 7 is going to take us through this page and probably most of the next page, right? And this, well, let's see how far we get. So costs, who's paying for what, okay? Unless otherwise agreed in writing, this paragraph only determines who is to pay for the inspection, test, certification, or service. It does not determine who's to pay for any work recommended or identified in any report. Typically, we would have this. Seller shall pay for our natural hazards disclosure, any professional company. Sometimes we may ask for the seller to pay for a termite report, right? And again, it doesn't say who's paying for the work. Now, can you just put in here and section 1 clearance? Yeah, you can put it there, right? You can definitely write it in there, or you can just put termite report. I think the contract was designed to say you pay for the report here and the work will be decided down below in the next paragraph. So we'll get there in a second. All right. 7B, government requirements and retrofit. So first, we're going to ask the seller to pay for smoke alarm, carbon monoxide device installation, and water heater bracing if required by law. Guess what? Yes, it is required by law. And the seller will give us statements of compliance that this stuff has actually been completed. Okay. 7B2 on the next page. I see this probably 50, 60% of the time where agents are countering out this entire paragraph, which boggles my mind. I don't know why they're trying to just counter out entire paragraphs. What is this? That's usually people counter this paragraph out because they don't know what it means and they don't know if it applies. So paragraph 7B2I, seller or buyer will pay the cost of compliance with any other minimum mandatory government inspections and reports. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, this is basically a city report or a county report or maybe even a state report or inspection. Okay, so what I see happen mostly is that people don't know when a report is required. So first, check with me. Second, check with escrow. Your local escrow will know, is a city report required? So locally, Compton, probably the #1, most infamous city requiring an inspection and the toughest in the neighborhoods, right? They're trying to get in there and make sure there's no unpermitted additions or non-conforming uses, to make the neighborhoods in compliance with the local zoning laws. Okay, so if we were to check the seller box, which is who I'd recommend checking it, all we're asking for with this first one is for the city report or inspection to be completed and for the seller to pay for it. Okay. The next one, II, and we'll check seller here. Here's where we're asking for the cost of compliance with minimum mandatory government retrofit standards. Okay. So I is for the report or inspection. II is for the cost of compliance to make the appropriate repairs to be in compliance with the city. And by the way, this is not something you can waive, right? I require this in your files. The only city, to my knowledge, that will allow you to actually complete a waiver is Compton. The buyer can sign a notarized document and take ownership of all the work requirements that are noted after the close of escrow. To my knowledge, no other cities actually allow for city reports to be waived or shifted the burden onto another party, right? It has to be done prior to close of escrow, okay? The cities are smart. They monitor the tax records and they see when deals close, and then they go and look to see, was a city report done? And if not, guess what? They're going to knock at your buyer's door when they become the owner of the property and say, hey, we need to come in and do an inspection. And by the way, the cities and their health and safety inspectors, they have more rights to enter your property than even the police do, right? I heard the Long Beach city inspector at one point tell me that oftentimes the police would follow the inspectors in to serve warrants because they had more rights to get into a property, right? So interesting. All right. Buyer will be provided with all these reports. Okay. So seller's going to pay for them. Buyer's going to get a copy, and that's it. Then we move on to escrow and title. Commonly, buyer and seller are going to pay their own fees. So I have each pay their own. The escrow company is going to charge each party their own portion of fees. Okay. Escrow holder to be seller's choice. I have seller's choice filled in there only because in this market, you know, you want to write competitive offers. So you're probably going to need to have seller's choice. Paragraph C2, seller will pay for the owner's title insurance policy. So we're going to get a title insurance policy to protect the buyer from anyone laying claim to their property. And we're asking the seller to pay for it, and we're asking the seller to choose any title insurance they want. So that's that. Buyer will pay for any title insurance that covers the lender. So that's a different policy. And then we get into D, other costs. Well, I usually mark that the seller will pay for county and city transfer taxes. HOA transfer fee, if any, might be negotiable. Paragraph 4 is defaulted that the seller will pay for HOA fees to prepare docs required by civil code. So we're looking at like CC&Rs, bylaws, rules, regulations, meeting minutes, budgets, etc. And if there's anything else that the lender or another party may require, it's negotiable to who pays for the remaining fees. I usually would designate that the buyer is going to pay for any other fees that they want that are not covered by civil code. Okay. We also have here the buyer will pay for an HOA certification fee. That's something the lender will usually require. You know, asking about you know, delinquent HOA dues, or you know, if there's litigation on the property, things of that nature. Sometimes in newer developments, you'll see a private transfer fee down here. You can ask the seller to pay for that. And then here's where I might say seller will pay for termite section 1 clearance if I didn't add it up at the top of the offer. And then 9 is other, right? I see sometimes you guys ask for people to pay for a transaction coordinator fee or admin fee or whatever. You know, be smart about that. Paragraph 10, seller shall pay the cost not to exceed blank of a 1-year home warranty plan issued by company of choice, right? Typically you can write in your company. And then optional upgrades, right? So you see I have First American, I've got first class upgrade written in here because that covers the AC and the value plus as well. So I might make an adjustment to the things I'm asking for. Don't leave the dollar amount blank. Go to First American's site or call the rep and ask how much does my policy cost if I want the AC, I want the pool, and I want the upgrade, right? You need to ask those questions, okay? And then there is a section here at the bottom that the buyer can waive the purchase of a home warranty. I don't know that you'd ever need to waive it, right? Even if you're not asking for one, but whatever. All right, let's go through paragraph 8. I think that'll be good enough to get us through the rest of today. Important paragraph. What comes with the house? Items included and excluded from the sale. Very important note to buyer and seller. Items listed as included or excluded in the MLS, flyers, marketing materials are not included in the price or excluded from the sale unless specified below, right? So if you see something that is mentioned in the MLS or written on a flyer that it's included or excluded, it better find its way into the contract. Otherwise, if it's personal property, it will not be included. I did a deal here in Long Beach, not too far away from the Long Beach office. I was out of town. My partner showed the house, and I guess at that time it was during an open house, and whoever was there, it wasn't even the listing agent, was telling people the appliances were not included. Well, I was out of state. I was in Utah, and my partner said they want to write an offer. I wrote the offer, and guess what I did? I checked stove, fridge, washer and dryer, because I didn't know. I wasn't there at the open house. I wasn't there at the showing. And the seller accepted the offer. Well, so guess what? We're at the final walkthrough. The seller's there moving and packing, and we ask how it's going, and they say, we're almost done. We just got to grab our appliances. Uh-oh, right? Now we got a problem. So I called the agent. I said, hey, we asked for all the appliances. Your sellers, so they're taking them. Please let them know that they need to stay. And I'll tell you, he was a little upset. I got some really nasty texts from this guy. about being sneaky and sneaking things into the contract. Guys, it's a contract. Read the contract, right? So look and see what is listed and represented. Tough lesson for the guy. He had to buy his client all new appliances, and my client got the appliances in the house. So pay attention, okay? What's in the MLS, what's verbal, what is referenced on the flyer does not matter. What is in writing in the contract between the buyer and seller is what matters. So what does come with a house? Well, all existing fixtures and fittings that are attached to the property, right? You guys might remember from your test, appurtenant. What is attached? What is stuck to the property, okay? And then it goes through and gives a list of the things that are typically considered attached. Electrical, mechanical, lighting and plumbing and heating fixtures, ceiling fans, fireplace inserts, gas logs, grates, solar power, built-in appliances, things that are like hardwired. You know, the stove is typically considered attached because it's usually connected to a gas line, right? Window and door screens, awnings, shutters. This one I see all the time, window coverings. So curtains, drapes, blinds, they are attached. Floor coverings, okay? Now a carpet would not be, a rug would not be attached, but the carpet obviously is. Antennas, satellite dishes, AC units, pool and spa equipment, garage door openers, remote control. So even the openers aren't attached, but they are listed here as included. The mailbox, okay, we should leave that. In-ground landscaping, anything that's planted, trees, shrubs, etc., are included. I think I told a story the other day where I had a client listing a property over in Artesia, and he told me to exclude the 3 palm trees in the back because he was going to dig them up and have them shipped to Oregon where he's moving, right? So had a little chuckle about that. And of course, he didn't end up doing that because he realized that would cost a lot of money and it was kind of ridiculous. So anyways, everything though that is planted is attached to the property. Water features and fountains, water softeners, water purifiers, security systems, alarms, etc. And then everything else that's attached, right? And we have our appliances, all stove, all fridge, except, right? Sometimes you see the garage fridge, right? So all the stoves all the fridges are included except for the, if I could spell, except for the garage fridge. Okay, so that one's not included, right? Washer and dryers, and then the following additional items. Okay, it's make sure you put that in there. All right, what else? Well, phone, home automation systems. This is another big one, right? Is a Ring doorbell considered attached to the property? Well, home automation, security, those are all listed here. So I would say yes, right? Internet connected hardware devices. Now, what about an Alexa? Oh, mine's going to go off right now. Cancel. Okay. So is that included? Well, that's plugged in. I would consider that not a piece of something that's attached or included. Now, you know, I'm looking around my house right now. I have this little, you know, dongle that attaches to my internet connected device, and it controls my ceiling fans. And that's, you know, home automation, right? Or those new, you know, learning thermostats. Are those included? Yeah, I would say those are probably included in the sale. Okay, so be aware. And talk to your client about this. You know, in the listing agreement, there is a section for you to go in and basically, you know, ask about this, because it says included or excluded on the listing agreement. Now, that's not an agreement between the buyer and the seller, but it's an opportunity to talk to your clients about anything that might stay or might not. And then, you know, as you do your walkthrough, pay attention, look for stuff like this. The next section goes into leased or liened items. Again, very important, because these items could have financial implications on the buyer on whether they can afford to buy the house or take over some of these items. So when I think of leased or liened items, I'm thinking of things like solar systems. I'm thinking of things like you know, energy efficiency. Sometimes you can get these loans, which I think most of them have been discontinued, but these PACE and HERO loans to upgrade like the windows or put new insulation or get an AC unit, you know, that's energy efficient or whatever. And these loans become liens against the property, or these solar systems might be leases that have to either be assumed by the buyer or bought out by the seller. So when you are a buyer or you're representing a buyer and you're walking the property, look out for this kind of stuff and ask the other agent, what's going on? Is this owned or leased or liened? And if you know, you have a listing, same thing, walk through and ask, you know, did you buy that outright or do you have a lease or a lien on that? Okay. The paragraph here it states that the buyer's ability to assume a lease or take the lien on the property is a contingency for the buyer. The buyer has the right to investigate and make a decision on whether they want to take over the lease or the lien, or if they can qualify. You know, sometimes you guys are out showing property and your buyers are maxed out on their pre-approval. Taking on a lease for $50 a month may push them beyond their qualifications. So you got to pay attention to that stuff, okay? Paragraph 6 says that the seller represents that all items are included in the price unless otherwise specified or owned, okay? So if something is not owned outright, the seller needs to disclose that to the buyer as soon as practical, okay? All right. C, items excluded from the sale. Unless otherwise specified, the following items are excluded: audio and video components such as flat screen TVs and speakers. You know, I'm sure CAR saw a lot of issues with, you know, people saying that, you know, a TV that was mounted to the wall was considered a fixture and should have stayed. So what they did is they went in here and explicitly excluded those types of things, okay? Even if any such item is attached or not to the property, okay? Or if a bracket of some sort is used, such as the wall mount, okay? Now the mounts themselves are addressed. Brackets attached to walls, floors, or ceilings shall remain with the property. So if the seller installed a, you know, wall-mounted flat screen TV, the TV goes, but the mount is supposed to stay unless they check the box and say, we'll remove the mount and we will patch the wall, but we're not going to paint the wall, okay? It does state specifically not painted. All right, guys and gals, it is 3:55. I've been talking for about 55 minutes straight. So with that said, I am going to stop the recording. I'm going to wrap things up for today, and I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions at this time. Now is a good time to ask.